Good morning. First sip of coffee. Friday, March 7th, my 37th birthday, technically in 7 minutes. So I was born at 8:21 in the morning. Just wanted to grab a quick second to say hello. And I am most of the way done with editing all the video I took over the last 5-6 days, whatever that was, technically the 2nd through the 6th. So that's been cool. Got everything lined up, figured out how to offload things from my mic system and line it up with the camera. I use DaVinci Resolve and it's all very smooth and quick. I have to do, a little bit of cutting and transitioning and put in some sound effects. I got some background music downloaded that I need to put in. A couple little things. Shouldn't take all that long today. Pretty confident at this point that I'm gonna get this video out today. In fact, I'll commit to that. It's just gonna be a matter of how much I can do. But I have a tendency to wanna do something at a level 10 when I don't necessarily have the knowledge base there, or at least the experiential knowledge base, just because I have kind of an on-paper understanding. So we'll get that video out today. I'm looking forward to it. Already got a handful of happy birthday messages, which is always endearing. Even had at least one person must have had in their social media memories pop up my announcement from last year that I was saving up for seminary. So I got a donation for that this morning, which again is always a blessing too. But really looking forward to some things this week. One of the things our worship team is focused on this year is the idea of the presence of God and trying to host the presence of God when we're doing musical worship. Of course, one of the things I'm studying out in Scripture and beyond is that worship is far beyond music. We tend to limit it that way in our modern Western American understanding in non-denominational church land. But a book came this week that we're going to kind of flesh out and we may do as a study. I have it because it just showed up yesterday, but it's called The Path of Presence. It's from the folks over at the Belonging Co. So I haven't read through that yet, but I'm thinking that might be one thing I kind of do a test read, skim through some pieces to give feedback to our worship director on if I think it's a good book study. And she asked me only because it was one of the things when she started her position a couple months ago, she gave everybody an opportunity to provide some feedback. And one of my elements of feedback was I'd love for us to actually do some more study. So I'm going to dig through that a little bit and then probably share bits and pieces on here of my thoughts or the questions and lines of thinking that it brings to mind. That's one of the things that slowed down my process of wanting to start publishing writing this month, was just realizing the level of awe and reverence that I have and want to continue to have for being accurate and representing things as best as possible. I don't want to be a perfectionist, but I want to follow what it talks about in James about there's an extra level of accountability for anyone who's teaching. I don't think that just means preachers getting up on a platform, but if you're teaching, you're representing supposedly truth from God on some level. And so I take that seriously, and I want to be really thorough when I'm showing those things and walking through it. And also from my background as an analyst and other sorts of logical and data representation I've had to do professionally. I just really am about showing my work too, so that stuff will be a little bit tedious probably. That's why writing is probably better than video for the most detailed stuff, because I can link to references and I can also not have to deal with so many transitions and extra call outs and digital manipulation on shooting just a raw video like this. But I'm going to read through that Path of Presence book, at least to an extent, and I think that's probably what I'll focus on, sharing mostly the thoughts that's bringing to mind, kind of like I did a little bit last week with some of the men's group I went to, or the sermon we came out of with small group, and that there were just some thoughts that popped up theologically, but I probably want to dig into that a little bit more, since that is really the ultimate reason for delving into a lot of this content stuff, is just to talk about the truth of God. So it is 8:18, almost 8:19 according to my computer, a couple minutes till my birthday. Thanks for joining me on this journey and any other that you're coming along. Most importantly, I hope you're joining God on his journey throughout history. Follow him above all else. Talk to you later. Why do I always do this with my hands? Anyway, Saturday, March 8th, getting later at night. We have a time change tomorrow morning, which means we got to be at church even earlier than normal. I am singing, so that'll be a little bit tiring, but I had to have a little bit of a come to Jesus meeting with myself yesterday into today. I could have pushed out the video, the initial one that I planned to, on my birthday, but it would have been really subpar, not to some over planning and perfectionist kind of level, but to the point that I wouldn't have even learned anything. So I've done a fair bit of video editing at my job, but they have all been really short training videos and little projects like that. So I had quite the learning curve with these extended videos. The final one is going to come out to be somewhere between 25 and 26 minutes based on the current cut I have. And I had to learn how to use proxies and figure out what the settings were on my computer to get those to run reasonably, and had a couple different crashes here and there, which were not a Da Vinci error, but a user error. And I got all that stuff figured out and fixed, and I got enough music, and that's all lined up, and I got some good cuts even to the music. So I'm actually really happy with where it is. I'm dialing in a couple little effects here and there, maybe still trying to figure out if I'm going to do some compositing with some text and some things like that. And then the last thing I really need to decide is if I'm going to try to do any sort of color grading. I'm leaning toward no, other than just some color correction, let's say, where some of the clips I shot really late at night are way too dark, so I'm going to have to bump the gain and some other things like that. But overall, it's actually been a really solid learning lesson, and in this case, a growing lesson. I said pretty plainly in the video I was going to have it out by my birthday, and then even reaffirm that for the beginning of this video, but ended up needing to make a decision. It was partially based on that quality and wanting to learn, and not necessarily falling victim to this arbitrary deadline thing with a hustle culture mindset, but also it was my birthday and my family wanted to spend time with me in the evening, my wife and my kids, and I could have totally pushed that aside and said, you know what, I'm just going to finish this video to prove a point to myself or something like that. And I'm glad I went the other way, and we hung out and just had a really good evening. And so I spent a good bit of time today editing. I got a couple different opportunities to go jump into my office. One of the other elements that's a little bit of a challenge, aside from the fact that my computer's not the nicest, hence why I have to use proxies and some of the other things that cause crashes, but we have a very small old house. It's from 1907. It's got 3 bedrooms, but one of them's passed through. It's all laid out weird. It's like 1,150 square feet. And our younger son sleeps in the same room that my office and computer are in, which is also a greenhouse room for my wife's plants, and it's where we keep a bunch of dressers worth of clothes, so it's just kind of like a multi-purpose room. But it means that some of these times in the evening where I probably would have the best opportunity to do editing, I don't get to. So maybe at some point in the future, I kind of started a second computer build because this computer crashed during a work project, but I got it up and running again, and I have some pieces for a new computer, but even if I got that up and running, I don't really have anywhere to set it up. Another desktop that would be even nicer, it would still probably land in the office, so I'm not sure that that would do me any good right now, and I don't have, you know, let's say $5,000 or $6,000 to spend on the type of laptop it would take to do really solid editing, so I'm putting that kind of money towards seminary, as I've pointed out a couple times. But anyway, it's been a good growing opportunity, and I set a goal and I missed it, but at the same time it was kind of an arbitrary goal. I tend to do this, you know, want to hit New Year's or hit my birthday or hit some anniversary or something. It clicks in my head as this very special opportunity, and I'm still really glad that I've taken the time to do anything and to actually take an action step forward, and I'm very close to having my first video done. It'll be published a couple days afterward. Probably the next one will go much quicker, because not only have I learned a whole bunch of elements about the editing process I need to do, but I also am mostly going to be doing talking head for this video. I'm not going to be filming myself making a cheesecake or some other stuff like that. You can probably hear my cats banging around over there at the gate. Yeah, so perfectionism has been a thing I've struggled with, and arbitrary deadlines, and trying to, you know, maybe if you call it a toxic trait, to use that lingo, I tend to be able to figure out something in my head a lot faster than I can realize it, or in the scope of me having done smaller videos for work, I can turn those around quickly, and this just ended up not playing out the same. So lesson learned, and same thing with prioritization, remembering to put my family first on my birthday instead of a personal goal, but still having made good progress, and I'm looking forward to getting this out into the world. So hopefully that'll be, I have a little bit of work to do tonight for the worship team with some charts, and then tomorrow morning we have actual church, and then we have dinner plans with my dad tomorrow and my stepmom for my birthday after the fact. So maybe by Monday evening I'll have the first video out, and I'm going to be editing this one along the way. I think is another lesson I've learned. So see you then. Oh, maybe I'm getting too old to keep walking in like this. I'm 37 now, right? It is Sunday, March 9th, and we had a really good day today with starting off with a fantastic worship service at church today. We had an acoustic set, and there was one section in particular. The last song was kind of an old throwback song that we knew was going to really be just encouraging, I think, across the entire span of our church congregation with different age groups, all the way from the young of the young up to the old of the old. And it was also just very sweet and contemplative. And right before that, we had a really open, free-flowing section that, at least for me as a singer, I don't get a ton of those opportunities to really kind of musically explore some of the different harmonies and melodies that I got to with one of my friends, Sierra, who was singing with me as well in the choir. So that was really, really nice. I always enjoy those kind of opportunities. Came home. I didn't really get to do much editing, but I am doing some software study on some of the things with DaVinci. So I was reading some of that while getting the kids together to take a nap. And then we all kind of took at least a little bit of a family nap because of the time change and still having to get up early. And then we had dinner tonight with my dad and my stepmom to celebrate my birthday, which was excellent. We went to a new restaurant for us. They've been there a couple times, but it was nice. I tried 2 different sandwiches because I'm a foodie at heart and I like to try a bunch of new things when I go to a new place. So that was good. Kids were really well behaved. Spent some time back at my dad and stepmom's house then. Our kids love to play there. So it was really, really wonderful evening, and just kind of winding down, getting ready for the start of the work week. Not always my favorite feeling. Sunday night, that's something I'm still kind of working through, is the challenges and dichotomy of the things that you get to do on the weekend and the sweet times of ministry and church and those kind of things, to then balancing that out with the fact that we need to work, that you know, it really is a problem to be so heavenly minded that you're of no earthly good. Like, we are supposed to be in this world despite not of it, and we have calls and things that we need to do here. When we're married, and parents in particular, as men, we have a responsibility to work and earn and provide for our families and future generations. So all that stuff plays in, but there are certainly elements in today's modern culture and society, and elements of the things that I do or the places that I've worked over the years that have been unfulfilling, if not worse. So got a little bit of that going on tonight, just kind of like, ugh, tomorrow's Monday, although it'll be a good day. I have some video editing to do for my job, and then a couple other things to gear up, but it'll be good to continue that. And then really tomorrow, I'm hoping over lunch, and then particularly probably after I'm off at work, being able to take some time to do some editing for this, and we'll see. I was hoping that if I got some editing time today too, plus whatever editing time tomorrow, I might be able to have my initial vlog up. Not 100% sure on that. There's a few things I want to dial in still. I'm probably not really going to do any color grading, I'm thinking, for now. That's enough of a deep dive that it'll eat up too much time. I'll do a little color correction, but I do have a couple animations and automations and things that I've got locked up. All the cuts are in, all the music's in. I probably need to start looking in some of my other free time that's not as editing centric for new music tracks for when this round of videos is done and I'm editing them. But had some really good conversation with my wife today about what it's like kind of going on this journey for me as somebody who likes to create and likes to produce, and haven't necessarily always had a place to put that, at least in the last couple years, because it's always been about planning and anticipation and thought instead of taking some action. Like, I've written some songs and a few other things, but even those haven't gone anywhere specific. They're not something I've released or done anything with. So looking forward to continuing this journey. And I know I said, I guess 2 days ago probably now, I'm definitely planning on getting into that book that our worship team, it seems like at this point, is going to do. I've got a copy. Our worship director has a copy. The woman who leads our sound production team grabbed a copy, and it looks like it's going to be a pretty good book and read through. So I'll keep you updated on that and give you some updates on what I see skimming through, and if there's anything that I kind of feel like the Holy Spirit is speaking out of that. thoughts that I would want to share. Anyway, we'll see you later. We're back on the couch, getting better every time. I do miss my office setup a little bit, but the way things have worked out time-wise and schedule-wise, and with the kids sleeping and other things, I just keep having to shoot down here right now. So it is a little bit after midnight, which makes this technically Tuesday, March 11th. I still don't have the video published from last week. However, I got my first draft totally done editing over the last 2 days, minus I need to get a thumbnail and I need to figure out what sort of graphic or something I'm gonna have at the end of the video. Normally on YouTube, there's some sort of end screen to recommend other videos to you, but I'm not gonna have anything like that, and I have no idea how that mechanism works. So I'll get the video uploaded and then figure out some of those YouTube pieces. I really need to just get the thumbnail, and then I'm gonna re-watch tomorrow with some fresh eyes the draft, just to make sure I didn't mess anything up. Very pleased with the kind of graphics and automation and thing I was able to figure out with some of the tools that I have. And really, again, kind of a steep learning curve on some pieces I didn't expect, but things that I think I'm going to be able to carry forward and do even faster and better with all subsequent videos, using proxies, rendering different automations in place. Some of the tools I bought within plugin form for DaVinci Resolve, I now know how they work and what the available options are for enhancing the video and not just having it be this shot of my face all the time and things like that. So very much looking forward to continuing this. I might lose some sleep tonight, not because of doing any sort of work or editing, but have a lot on my mind in a good sense of whenever something kind of theologically engages me, or I have some good conversation with people, that kind of will churn sometimes. But just really reflecting this evening, tonight, early this morning, however you want to say it, on the realness of the need for the gospel and for the ministry of reconciliation, and how a right and real relationship with God is so important in people's lives. We have a relatively small community. Our church is about 500 people. We're really intimately tied in with, let's say 10% of that. My wife is part of the women's ministry, and she started a mom's group for stay-at-home moms at our church. I'm part of the worship team, music worship in particular. And then she's part of a women's group that I'm part of the counterpoint men's group of most of the same husbands to that women's group. But it's, like I said, I think 10% is probably a reasonable number. And just within that, even tonight, we've had some people reaching out from different circles of ours, or even over the last couple of weeks to really round it out, because some of this has not all been tonight, but some of these were as recent as tonight, just multiple people dealing with family members that they're concerned about, self-annihilation, and people who have been through horrendous things in their lives, struggling with how they view God and the theology that plays out in their lives now, and hoping that they work through that in a way that they end up knowing the true God and are following the true gospel. We have people that we know with severe illnesses going on in their families, people who are on their deathbeds potentially. We pray not. All these things, even just, infidelities and broken marriages, all tied in. Some of these things, 3 or 4 of the points I just mentioned, are all in individual instances kind of overlapping. And those realities are the things that make this kind of stuff so important. They're why I have the greatest passion compared to my other interests for talking about the gospel and truth and theology and working through these things. And I mentioned for the video last week that we had a great dinner with our pastor friends and actually talk theology. Normally, again, we try to be more just friends who have young parents, and we're just living life with other believers and trying to kind of keep it normal instead of always being really formal, especially because they are pastors and they are preaching every week and all that. But we did get into some good theological conversation about the tendency to throw the baby out with the bathwater in the modern church when people run into something that they either no longer like or no longer believe or don't find a good answer to. And really, from my perspective, one of the things that's critical is learning and knowledge, particularly epistemology, if you get into philosophy, which I highly recommend everybody do, knowing how we know what we know, or how we argue for things to be true and all the logic associated with that. It's amazing to me how many people don't have a grasp on that, because we're not really taught that in our general education in the US at least. And it leaves people with some really disparate, inconsistent views where, again, throwing the baby out with the bathwater is essentially second nature and easy, because they don't realize some of the gaps that might be in their understanding or in the way that they're fleshing out different ideas. Or overcorrecting is another really, really common one from some sort of hurt or some sort of confusion. So that's something that's really going to be not weighing on my mind, but churning in a rather excited manner. And I say that because I think if you come to those kind of realizations with the wrong perspective, you can start to almost get this like nihilistic view of there's no point in being in the church. Everybody's got their own views, or everybody's in disagreement, or we can never really fully know the truth on X, Y, and Z matters. But really, what I'm seeing now is more and more people, through things like these conversations being democratized on the internet or whatever, more and more people actually wrestling with these ideas and talking about them and being more open to having conversations outside of just the same old Sunday 3-point sermon, 7 ways to make your week better, or whatever. Our pastor who preached this past Sunday had a phenomenal message. It was one of the best I've heard in quite some time at our church. There was a lot of preaching on Matthew 18. We were talking about forgiveness in particular was the topical element of the sermon, but really exegeting through Matthew 18 and some of the cultural elements there. And I always enjoy when good context is brought out and good exegesis, and there was a little bit of scholarship discussed on which name of the tree you want to use and some other things like that. But also just in the context that I see a lot of the American church is really enjoying comfortable, even sometimes fluffy messages. There were some really great points in this Matthew 18 sermon about how wonderful the promises of God are, but sometimes the promises that exist and the conditional promises that exist are not fluffy and not feel good. Like the fact that in Matthew 18, there's this whole element of, if you don't forgive other people, then Christ might not forgive you, is the gist. I would recommend reading it. You know, I'm going off the top of my head here, but that whole point there, that not everything in the Bible is meant to make you feel good. If it does, you're probably not reading it right across the board, because the whole reason for us needing a Savior, the whole reason for us having the message of the gospel and needing reconciliation with God is that we are in rebellion and away from Him and in nature. And so those elements, again, are just really, really resounding in my mind tonight. And I'm happy to be in a time and in a place, and to a certain extent, even the smallest extent, contributing to conversation around that and being able to engage with real people, particularly in our small groups and little communities that we're doing, but really getting to speak into these issues and challenges in people's lives for real and see hope restored and see restoration. And it really inspires me, again, because it's part of the Great Commission. It's a purposeful thing, that we're not just in, some Sunday club to go hang out. So that's really what's on my mind. Hopefully you can hear what I'm saying and not my cats who are terrorizing all over the floor one another with their little jingle bell collars and everything. But that's where I'm really at. So I'm excited to continue with these videos and really break down into even more scriptural analyses on some of these things as they come up in our real life. And again, the skills I've learned in some of the video editing, being able to reference those things or pull up some good visuals, I learned how to do all that this week, and that'll make it even easier. I think I even have a workaround. I'm not getting my camera to integrate very well directly with my computer for things like a kind of podcast or screen analysis setup, but I have a way to make them line up on the back end in post-production. So God bless you. Thanks to anyone who ends up watching or listening to any of this, and looking forward to keeping the journey going. Well, I know I'm getting kind of tired of this couch. I would say you probably are too, except I still imagine I'm the only one really watching this. So The other thing I would be tired of is hearing me say, tomorrow's gonna be the day the video goes up, but I think this will be the last day I have to say that as well. Video is fully edited. I got all sorts of little things done that I almost forgot to do. Got them reviewed this evening. It's Tuesday, March 11th currently, just a little bit before midnight, so we're making a little bit of progress getting earlier, but video's done, edited. I'm really happy with it. Just need to figure out doing some sort of still image for the thumbnail tomorrow. I think I want to use a photo of me, so I might have to go out early in the morning and grab one somewhere that's like outside. I actually almost got to do this update outside earlier today. We took our boys to a local park, but it just didn't really work out. They needed me to be dad and not be filming some content or doing something. As much as this is such an important project to me and something I really am enjoying already, I got to be dad, and I had to, push them on the swings and run around with them and help them go up and down the slide and just watch them when they just wanted to be watched. I heard somebody say recently, sometimes the things that our kids just need the most is literally just our presence. I was watching our kids last night when my wife was at a meeting, and they were literally asking me at points where I had to walk out of the room, can you just come in the room? And they're both toddlers, so it's not even like they needed my help, they just wanted my presence there. So that's what I did today. Along those same lines, then back to the video editing for the potential as maybe some sort of business or side hustle or opportunity like that. That comes down to what's been on my mind throughout a lot of today, and even the last couple days, almost as like a foil and shadow to some of what I talked about yesterday. But I've been reflecting a lot and wrestling a lot with the ideas of merit and meritocracy and competence and ability and study and all these kind of things. There's a newsletter I get in my email that's aimed toward men, and it's supposed to be just a 1 to 2 minute read, but really reflecting on what are the common problems for men, which a lot of times are things like overly trying to achieve or getting wrapped up in your ego or really feeling like you have to constantly be busy or doing. I don't feel that I'm in a place where I try to do things so much for God's approval or to earn my salvation. I'm mature enough in my faith to be beyond that, but there's still sometimes just an element or drive of there's bigger and better things, or I need to be constantly improving, and there's always a risk that gets unhealthy. But I also get put in situations frequently or have conversations with other people frequently who are in situations where people without the appropriate level of skill or the appropriate level of care or the appropriate level of knowledge, whatever kind of facet you want to look at, but people who are lacking in particular areas end up in positions and situations of influence and decision making and just all the complications that can create. Well, that's in the church, that's in businesses and jobs, that's in people's families, anything like that. And I wrestle with that in a number of different arenas of my life, and there's this really tough balance of trying to weigh out and balance out how to be humble, how to be respectful and loving, how to recognize that God doesn't always work at the same kind of measurement and scale that we would anticipate from a human perspective, where Scripture mentions in plenty of places things like it is the foolish people God uses to confound the wise, and that the greatest will be the least, and the least will be the greatest. Throughout the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is talking about it as the overlooked people who he's going to come and bless and who are blessed. There's all sorts of what I would call dichotomies that are against everyday standard human expectation. But then there's also elements of us needing to study to show ourselves approved, and you look at the parable of the talents and people who are actually taking action or not and being responsible. There's entire books in the Bible, like Proverbs, that are wisdom literature by genre, and there's an element and a value to that, and we're to love the Lord our God with our wholeness of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. That might be out of order, but the point is that the mind is in there as well. And so some of these things really, like I said, confound me in actual application in my life or in the lives of people around me who are bringing these concerns to the table at times of counseling or times of gathering together in men's group or small group or whatever. So that was on my mind a lot. Had a couple instances at work today of situations like that, and really working to balance that out. But sometimes I end up with these not necessarily daydreams, but a little bit of an inclination of, you could take these skill sets that you have or are learning, that as long as they're just a couple points of skill above the average person, that gives you an avenue to potentially make an opportunity out of it. So that's another side thing that popped up in my brain just today from this endeavor. But really happy with where things are going. I have worship rehearsal tomorrow. I'm playing acoustic guitar, and I got asked kind of last minute at the end of the day, very late yesterday, if I would sing on a couple pieces, which is fine. Singing is my primary instrument from my college days. Guitar is my primary instrument as far as time spent with it and playing. I play some keyboard and very, very occasionally play some drums, but I don't have a drum set to practice on, so I only do that as a last resort. But I'll be playing acoustic and singing this week. It should be a lot of fun, because it pretty much always is, not just because I get to play music and that's enjoyable, but I have a really, really solid team of other musicians that I get to worship the Lord with, and it's really edifying in so many ways. So looking forward to that tomorrow. Still haven't delved into the book, The Path of Presence, but that's on my list. I will probably read that tonight a little bit before I go to bed, and then even some more tomorrow after I do whatever photo and editing in the morning and start to get this uploaded. But I'm looking forward to then diving into the edit for this kind of ahead of time. I need to figure out what day I want to stop filming. I did, the 2nd through the 6th on the first video, and then the 7th now through the 11th. That would kind of mean this, if I'm keeping the same time frame, this would be kind of my last filming for this. But I might go a little longer. These have been a lot easier to shoot in the sense of I don't have a random kitchen scene, although I might try and get somewhere outside tomorrow for an update, just to have a different scene than this. Yeah, my office has been unavailable recently just with time frames and whatnot, but I'm recognizing the potential I have to just ramble here, because it is almost therapeutic, or at least cathartic, to talk about the things that are flowing through my mind all the time. But I don't want to turn this into a rambling thing. I want to get more into a position of being intentional with this and having more focused conversation, at least sometimes. So I'm going to cut it here tonight. We'll see you tomorrow, and looking forward to talking about Path of Presence. Welcome back to the office. It's very nice to be here instead of on the couch. I didn't do too much of an update yesterday, filmed the setup for my guitar for worship rehearsal last night, but I came home and I did some reading in the book that we're looking at doing as a worship study, and spent some time just with my wife instead of filming another update, knowing that I'd get around to do this, because I finally got my video published yesterday from the previous week. Very happy about that. So many learning curves and little things that were hiccups where I almost didn't get that done, even just figuring out subtitles and how those work, and then they were off by a couple seconds because of some obscure setting in DaVinci Resolve and all these kind of things. But I finally got it all together, done, published. It's got a thumbnail, it's got subtitles. It's not perfect, and that's just how it's going to be to learn, right? So really happy about that, really looking forward to continuing to grow in that process. Worship rehearsal last night went well. We are doing a couple old songs. I guess the woman who's leading worship this week was saying that she and her husband kind of started re-listening to some 90s worship, which is well before I was a Christian, and that inspired at least one or two of her picks for this week. But I'm playing and singing, playing guitar and singing, so that's kind of fun to do both at the same time. And then next week I'm leading at our friend's church in another town, so I'll be doing that. But I had a really good call at work actually earlier today. and we got down the road of discussing leadership a lot, which is actually a huge topic of interest to me and passion, because it's one of those fundamental elements to how you live your life, and it applies to everything: your leadership at home, your leadership in the church, your leadership at work. I'm a very big fan of the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, who are two former Navy SEALs, and without going down a whole thing of their past, you can go read it or watch Jocko as a podcast as well. But that book has, I try to take, when I read a book, especially a book that's really impactful, I've read that book about a half dozen times now, but I try to distill it down to one key principle that's like the number one thing I take out of it, along with all the other lessons. And the primary point that I've taken out of that book is there's no such thing as bad teams, only bad leaders. I believe that pretty much to the core of my being at this point, and that's because leadership has all of the opportunity to make the calls and make the decisions. And you're doing hiring and firing in a work context, or you're bringing people on or off a team in a church context, or again, you're the one with the resources and assets at home as far as being parents over your children. Like, you have to make those decisions and then make them work. And if something's going wrong, you also have the autonomy and resources and decision to fix that and make changes, as opposed to just kind of wallowing in it. So had a really good conversation on that at work today, with just some things that my one subordinate and another kind of cross-functional guy who will probably be on my team at some point in the next year or two, we had some conversation along those lines with things like what we're doing in e-commerce and other areas where we work together. But that really fired me up in a good way, and I needed that. I feel like that is probably more the central theme I've been trying to talk about the last 2 or 3 days that I've been doing updates. Is almost, I kind of felt like I was stabbing out in the dark with a number of different topics and touching on this thing over here and touching on this thing over there, and it was a little bit messy and sloppy, but it was really coming back to these fundamental leadership principles and elements that run through my mind a lot, that I'm seeing, quite frankly, not follow through in a lot of my areas of engagement in life right now, or that I'm seeing people outright avoid, not just fail at, and things like that really can perturb me at times, but at the same time encourage me that there's opportunity for folks who want to come in and make those changes, and I am seeing people do that as well. So also hoping to be one of those people, honestly, with things like doing this channel and talking about some of these concepts. So really encourage you to read that Extreme Ownership book if you've not. I think it's, though it's not a Christian book, I think the 4 main principles, which because of their background in the military, they give these kind of militaristic names, but there's 4 main principles, and I think they line up perfectly from a Christian paradigm of, they call them the 4 laws of combat, that's it. And the first one is cover and move, which is more the idea that we're not individuals and not to be individualistic, but that we function in a team, which of course in the church is the body of Christ. It's not just about me, it's about all my brothers and sisters serving Christ as the body on earth. The next rule is simple, and I think there's a lot of elements. Obviously, it can get complex digging into scripture and some things like that. Theology is not the simplest thing in the world, but a lot of the elements of the Christian walk are simple, that we should be revering and worshiping God in every facet of life as much as possible, that we should be following very generous principles, general and generous principles, but general principles about being loving according to the biblical standard of what that means, being generous according to the biblical standard of what that means, being peaceable in the biblical standard of what that means, so on and so forth, and even living to a certain extent quietly and focusing more on eternal things than earthly things. So those are all general principles that, while are not easy to live out, are simple to sum up in many ways. And then the third law is prioritize and execute. That's kind of more of a pragmatic thing, but again, I think that applies very much to a Christian worldview too. There's a hierarchy of things that we're supposed to take care of and do within our spheres of influence and within the lives that God has positioned us for in the day and age that He brought us into existence. And then the last thing they call decentralized command, but that is effectively just delegation. It's a little bit more nuanced than that, but the idea that, again,
back in tandem, kind of full circle with the first law of combat, the cover and move. We're part of a team, so it's not a lone wolf thing and you're not the big dog. You might be responsible for making greater levels or greater numbers of decisions, but we need to be working together as the body of Christ to make the things happen on earth that God has commissioned us to make happen on earth. So that, like I said, that really was an encouraging conversation I had this morning on a call, and I'm pretty fired up about it. But I also wanted to pull out, I did start digging into the path of presence, and there was a thing on chapter 19, or page 19 in the first chapter, sorry, but this stuck out to me. It's a nice quote. So far, the way this book is laid out is that it takes all these different mountaintop experiences or references in scripture and talks about how each of those is kind of an encounter with the presence of God in different ways. The first one being Eden. I was impressed that they took the time to refer to Eden as a mountaintop anyway, which is scriptural, and one of my favorite theologians, Dr. Michael Heiser, he talked about this, and so I was impressed to see that on the list as well. But this quote struck me when I was reading last night. All sin finds a common denominator in ultimately failing to trust God's character and follow his loving commands, that he is who he says he is, and that his way is the best. So that was really good, I thought, and there's a lot of other little encouraging elements. I'm not going to read the whole book to you, and I don't want to give a giant summary, but so far I'm encouraged with the way the first chapter is engaging with the idea that it's fundamental to recognize that God, what makes him unique amongst all the false gods is that he walks with his people and isn't just this demanding presence who views us all as worms or as subjugate to his oppressive rule and reign, but he's a father and he loves us and he wants to walk along with us in life, and then it's going to obviously develop out from there. But that's all been good too. Yeah, so one of the other elements I've learned, finally getting to put my video out yesterday, is just all the different little bits and pieces that come together. So I figure I might talk through those even just to help solidify in my brain the steps there. But each of these days that I'm filming an update, There's audio that I have to tie to it. So I'm offloading the footage from the camera, and then there's audio from a dedicated mic system that I have here, which I hit earlier, so hopefully I didn't make too much of like a smack sound or whatever, but I have to line those things up, spread them out. I have to kind of chop out the sections that don't matter or that I was rambling or where there was some sort of break. I'm gonna have a lot more cuts this week in between things where I've had cats running around like crazy or kids screaming, or there's a wood chipper going outside down at the neighbor's house right now. I don't know how much of that you can or can't hear, but even times where I've kind of found myself, especially late at night, freezing mid-thought going, what was I gonna talk about, or where am I now? You know, I'm finding that I work a lot better in the morning, especially early in the morning when I'm fresh. But after all that slicing and stuff, then there's other things to line up, all the different automations and animations and changing the music volume, which I have to even get music in the first place. That's one of the things I'll probably do this evening, is dig into some more music for this video, but it should go a lot faster. I learned what the automated settings are for generating subtitles and then going in and editing those, and the whole thing's a lot faster. I'm not really doing much color grading right now, just making sure anything that's off is color corrected. And then I have to export that and line it all up. I was pleased that since I bought a studio license for DaVinci Resolve, which was just at the end of last year, my rendering times are much better on videos, even though I'm only doing really short videos generally at work for training purposes. This video was 27.5 minutes, almost 28 minutes maybe, and it rendered in like less than 10 minutes. So there's other things that I've learned, nuances to get the subtitles to line up right on YouTube. I found out yesterday I have to change the way the time code is laid out in DaVinci Resolve. It starts at 1 and needs to start at 0, even though 1 is the default. So I had to change that manually. And things like working with bigger files, I have to create proxies, which are like artificial copies of the raw footage that I'm taking and made a little bit lower quality so they play back easier. Or some of the animations I generate, I have to render them in place so they're like pre-rendered and will play through properly. Just these little things. But it's been a fun process to learn. My video editing skills, I feel like, have genuinely 10x'd just with this first video compared to some of the itsy bitsy things I've been doing at work with training videos again. So really, really excited about this. I think today might be the last day of filming. I've been trying to figure out where I want to cut it. It may always be just Thursdays. I may just cut Thursdays and start editing either Thursday nights or Fridays. But I'm looking forward to putting out a second video and figuring out, I didn't even mention the thumbnail. That was a little bit of an excursion yesterday, kind of a weird workaround. I used DaVinci Resolve to create it, even though it's a still, but kind of learned how that works as well. So anyway, one of my kids seems like he's finding his way up here, but we'll catch up later.